The Edmonton Oilers just lost game 3 of their second round series to the Vancouver Canucks, and it's time for some soul searching.
You are Locked On Oilers, your daily podcast on the Edmonton Oilers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's edition of Locked On Oilers. I am your host, Nick Arturs, and man, every segment of today's show is going to be about Game 3. The third segment is going to be a little bit broader than just something that's been Game 3. It's been developing as the series has gone on, but first segment, we're going to tackle how serious the situation is. I was going to say how grim the situation is, but it's only 2-1, and there are some positives to take away from this game, even though the Oilers did lose 4-3. Second segment, got to be a goaltending conversation again. And then the third segment, it's real simple. What are you prepared to do about it? To quote the great Michael Jerome Irving, what are you prepared to do about it? And we'll get on into it right off the bat. The Oilers did not come ready to go. They have started slow in all of these games against the Canucks, where they just cannot get their feet under them, where the Canucks play an annoying, strong defensive style that frustrates the Oilers. And I think you saw that manifest itself really, really directly in the second and especially in the third period of the game last night. And there just was not a whole lot going on. And I know people are going to point at the shots on goals, the scoring chances. And yeah, the Oilers had more expected goals. They had more high danger chances. If you go back and you watch the shots on goal, the Canucks are inviting them to take those really poor, low quality chances, whether they be from the point, from the walls. If Silovs gets a clean look at most of these pucks, he's making the save. And it never really felt like the Oilers were going to be able to pot two in that third period. And I know they got within one, and in that final scramble at 5-6 seconds to go, they got a couple decent shots on net. But the way the Canucks were playing and the way they were forcing the Oilers to play, it wasn't the recipe for a comeback. When you are trying to come back from a multi-goal deficit, you need the game to open up. You need the other team to start trying to trade chances with you to open up defensively. And the Canucks, as stubborn as they were, they refused. They spent the vast majority of that third period in their own zone, clogging up passing lanes, clogging up shooting lanes, blocking an ungodly amount of shots, and refusing to let the Oilers use their skill to open anything up. And the reality of the situation is the Oilers hit a couple posts. The Canucks got some ridiculous bounces. Some of the saves Silovs made tonight, he had no business making. That one save he makes on the Corey Perry shot shouldn't happen, frankly. That puck should have been in the net. The one save he had down the stretch in the third period on Draisaitl, that should have been in the net too. The two posts, but ifs, ands, or buts do not win hockey games this time of year. And I understand being frustrated, and frankly, you as an Oilers fan have a right to be frustrated with the way they performed tonight. The Canucks are not this good. I know the Canucks had a really strong regular season. I know they were in the hunt for the President's Trophy down till about 3 games to go. The Canucks are a solid team. They are playing a goalie who has less than 20 career starts in the NHL, and the Oilers did not start to pepper him and make him play goalie until the third period of this game. And I know, but people are going to say, well, the Canucks are a good defensive team. You're right. The Canucks are a good defensive team. What did you expect to happen in the second round of the playoffs, the third round of the playoffs, the Stanley Cup final? At some point, you were going to meet a team that made you uncomfortable. And the Oilers had real adversity after that first month. Back in November, when they still had Woodcroft as the coach and Stuart Skinner couldn't stop a beach ball. And we're going to talk about Stuart Skinner's game. They faced real adversity back in October into November. They are at a point now where they have serious foundational lineup questions going into Game 4. And that might sound a bit melodramatic, but the Oilers have not played well through 3 games in this series. You could make a strong argument that even though the Oilers won game 2 and they controlled the shots on goal and they had the puck more, did it ever feel like the Oilers were playing well tonight? Did it ever feel like they were going to mount a multi-goal comeback? And I tweeted it during the game. It felt like when McDavid and Draisaitl weren't out there because they were playing together, there was no chance the puck was going in. And I know Corey Perry was that close. I know Evander Kane had a couple of stuffs at the net front that almost went in. I thought Dylan Holloway was noticeable. I thought McLeod, usual fast self, but none of those guys are going to make something happen outside of structure. And when you are a team like the Oilers, if you are going to load up, if you're going to put Draisaitl and McDavid together and play them with Hyman or play them with Nugent-Hopkins or whoever you're going to put with the wing with them, those guys have to win their minutes. And this is going to sound unfair the way I'm about to say this, but I do think it's important to say. If you put McDavid and Draisaitl together and you can't win in their minutes, that's entirely on you as a coach. And I understand they were only outscored 1-0. They vastly outplayed the Canucks when they were on the ice together. But if you are in a game like this where you need to get offense going and you're going to load it all up on one line at 5-on-5, you don't also get to do we had some good looks. If you had some good looks, they would have went in the net. And I want to give Chris Knobloch the benefit of the doubt. I do think he is a solid hockey coach. I also understand the limitations of what a coach can actually tangibly do. Hockey is not like football. It is not like basketball, where as the game goes along, coaches are going to make adjustments. They're going to point out tendencies. They're going to switch things up. Hockey is like soccer. You have one system. If it's not going well for you, your coach is not going to change their system. They are going to insist you lean into the system harder and execute the system better. And I thought the Oilers did a really poor job of breaking out of their own zone. I didn't think the forwards did a good enough job coming back to make themselves available as targets. I thought that played into the Canucks forecheck particularly well, and it allowed them to get some energy. And that's really the key here. These first periods of these playoff games, it's kind of like trying to find your rhythm with a dance partner where you're trying to see who's leading. And if you are not leading in these games, you have to be able to score on the counterattack. And the Oilers are a good counterattacking team because they have high-end players. But when you play all your high-end players on one line together, you are hamstringing your depth. And we know the Oilers are only going to go as far as Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl go. And I know they both had nice counting stats nights. They both got on the stat sheet for special team stuff, but they didn't put one in the net at 5-on-5. And in a game like this, that is the difference. When you are playing on the margins, and I don't think the Oilers were atrocious tonight. I think they were mediocre to bad. I think they were a C+, and they still very well could have won this game. At some point, though, if you are going to make something happen for you, and I'm talking about in terms of a long playoff run, going to a cup final, winning a Stanley Cup, you're going to get punched in the mouth, and you're going to have to find a way to adapt, and you're going to have to find a way to overcome adversity, even if you're not well situated for it. They brought Calvin Pickard in for the third period, and Calvin Pickard very well may start game 4. And we're going to talk about the goaltending situation coming up next on Locked On Oilers, where we've got your team covered every day. One of your most important responsibilities as a provider is setting up your family safety net. Life insurance is an important part of that safety net. But trying to find the right policy on your own can be time-consuming and stressful. Policygenius is the country's leading online insurance marketplace. It saves you time and money so you can provide your family with the financial safety net starting today. With Policygenius, you can find life insurance policies that start at just $292 per year for $1 million of coverage. Some options offer same-day approval and avoid unnecessary medical exams. Policygenius helps you compare your options from top companies, and their team of licensed experts is on hand to walk you through the process every step of the way. Talk to a team of award-winning agents that will help you compare quotes from all of America's top insurers in just a few clicks to find your lowest price. It's concerning. Your work life insurance policy may not offer enough protection for your family's needs. Even worse, it may not come with you if you switch jobs. Check life insurance off your to-do list in no time with Policygenius. Head to policygenius.com/lockedonnhl or click the link in the description to get your free life insurance quotes and see how much you could save. That's policygenius.com/lockedonnhl. Hello, everyone, and thank you so very much for making this Monday edition of Locked On Oilers a part of your day. I know the feeling. It is rough getting up the morning after one of these games where your team gave you just a little bit of hope that they were going to be able to pull one out and inexplicably win, kind of like they did on Friday night, where the Canucks really did the Oilers a lot of favors in that game. They stopped pushing. They stopped really being aggressive, trying to create offense, and it allowed the Oilers to creep back in and ultimately win. And I know the first segment sounded a little bit dire, a little bit morbid. Even though the series is only 2-1, it's only been 3 games. The Oilers split in Vancouver, which that's an accomplishment. If you can split the opening salvo as the road team, you've done your job. Now, less than ideal to lose game 3. And I think you are now at a point where, as Chris Knobloch, if you're in his shoes, you seriously have to consider everything at your disposal. And one of the things that's at his disposal is Calvin Pickard, somebody who does not have an extensive NHL track record. He's not quite Arturs Silovs in total obscurity with minimal experience, but Pickard's got 139 career NHL starts. His career record is 47, 61, and 11. 2.93 goals against average, 904 save percentage. In 23 starts this year, 3.27 goals saved above expected. He has never been a full-time starter on a good team. The only time he has played more than 40 games in a season was on the 16-17 Colorado Avalanche, who were an atrocity of a hockey team. He was the lowest-ranked goalie in goals saved above expected for the 16-17 season. Though I'm not going to put all of that on him. I know goal saved above expected accounts for quality of scoring chance, but you could have put a literal brick wall in that net on that Avalanche team and they would not have been particularly good. So I think we can take that with a grain of salt. But in my opinion, and I said this the other day in regards to Jeremy Swayman and the Bruins and their situation after game 2 in Florida, I said this on the Locked On NHL Power Ranking show every Thursday I do with Hunter Hodes. Last Thursday, the Bruins pulled Jeremy Swayman from a 4-1 game in the third period. And at 4-1, I feel like you can leave your goalie in there and it's not the end of the world. I feel like at 4-1, if your starting goalie is still in there, it's not the end of the world. Excuse me here, I got to take a sip of water. Jeremy Swayman was in the game. The Panthers made it 4-1. I want to say there was like 12, 13 minutes to go in the third period. And Jim Montgomery looked down his bench and he sent in Linus Ullmark, last year's Vezina Trophy winner, somebody who started 2 games in the Toronto series and ultimately was usurped fully by Jeremy Swayman. But the reason you do that as a coach is twofold. Number one, it gets your guy out of the game and it allows him a mental reset. It starts the process of putting the game behind him. You heard me talk about this in regards to Stuart Skinner after game 1 in Vancouver. I said the biggest priority was him having a short memory and feeling like he would be able to go out in game 2 and be impactful in a positive way. It is really difficult as a goalie on these quick turnarounds of every other day to mentally reset, to put the previous game behind you. And I do think there is a value in that. I do think there's a value in getting your starter out of there, getting him getting him in the room, changed, showered, ready to get out of there as soon as possible to begin that reset process. And then twofold, energy wise, like physically energy wise, you get him out of there to save him from burning energy. And you don't want to call it a meaningless game because anything can happen in a hockey game, even 4-1, 5-1, 6-1, whatever. If there's time on the clock, weird things can happen. I understand the mindset of the game's not over until it's over, but I do think part of the reason they took Skinner out is both of the things I just said. I think one, it gives him the opportunity to mentally reset. And I did not think Skinner was atrocious, but he needs to come up with some of these shots. I have a hard time defending a goalie who concedes 4 goals on 18 shots. And I know some of these are redirects, some of these are tip-ins, broken plays, there's some power play stuff. I understand all of that. But if you as a team are going to go all the way, you are going to need your goalie to come up with a timely save. I understand the Oilers have not put him in the best position to succeed. They have been really clunky in their own zone. They have struggled to transition from defense to offense. Darnell Nurse and Cody Ceci, again, have continued to struggle at 5-on-5, and it's really become an issue for the Oilers in those non-Bouchard Ekholm minutes. I can't say the Oilers have reached a breaking point with Skinner. I don't think I, as a head coach, would have the convictions to go to a guy whose first NHL playoff action was this game, the one that was played 20 minutes ago as of the time of recording this episode. I don't feel as a head coach you can sell that to the guys on your team, to your GM, to your team president, to your owner, to your fan base. And it's not out of the realm of possibility that the Oilers decide to go to Picard. But I do think you run the risk of not being able to send Skinner back out there if you do that. And that's going to sound a bit extreme, but we have track record stuff with this. This is especially prescient in football with young quarterbacks. If they're really struggling and you bench them and their confidence is really waned, and you go to a backup who's got no ceiling, who's, Tyrod Taylor or Joe Flacco, if we're talking, that's the example that came to mind was with the Jets 2 years ago with Joe Flacco and Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson was a fragile, immature player that needed nourishment and encouragement. And the Jets were trying to win football games, so they could not justify continuing to play a guy who was not good. And they brought in Joe Flacco, who, not good, but more stable, less volatile, gave them better chances to win just relying on their defense. And then Joe Flacco got hurt, and they asked Zach Wilson to go back in. And Zach Wilson looked around and said, why would I do that? I don't think Stuart Skinner would give them the why would I do that after getting benched, but I do think it would hurt his confidence. And we know his confidence is already fragile. We know that this is weighing heavily on him, and he knows he needs to be better. And I think ultimately it's a self-defeating cycle that a lot of these younger goalies, especially the ones who don't have long track records, they get in their own heads and they become their own worst enemy. I think Stuart Skinner is capable of being a backstop on a Stanley Cup championship team. I think the Oilers would need to play better in front of him, but he does not need to be incredible. The Canucks did not do a whole lot tonight. If Stuart Skinner is just average as opposed to bad, the Oilers probably win this game. If the Oilers get one of those posts to go in, or Silovs doesn't make one of those stupid saves he probably shouldn't have made to begin with, the Oilers probably win this game. But being that the Oilers lost this game, and it was on the margins of pucks that are 2 or 3 inches from going over the goal line in their net and weird goals beating Skinner, it's a lot easier to point to Skinner's net and say, hey, man, you got to keep one more of those 4 out, as opposed to, we got robbed, tough luck. The Oilers need Skinner to be better if they're going to come back and win this series. Coming up next, we're going to talk a little bit about how the Oilers can mentally prepare for Game 3 and just how weird the officiating has been in these playoffs. Coming up next on Locked On Oilers. Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers. Oilers fans, deep breaths. I know it's a Monday. I know the Oilers lost, ruined the energy going into the week already. I want to thank you for making this episode a part of your day. I know on a Monday morning after my team loses a playoff game, I basically teeter on nonverbal to just genuinely unpleasant to be around because these games are close and it's, oh, if this happened or that happened, we could have done this. And when you're this close, it is hard not to get hung up on the details because the details are what gets burned into your brain because it really is that close. It really is just a matter of a puck being this much closer to over a line versus that much closer to over a line, or this angle of an instant replay showing this happening. And it is really easy to get frustrated, but this series is not over. It takes 4 games to win a playoff series. 3 have been played. The maximum remaining is 4. This series now is best of 4. The Canucks win 2 more of those 4. It's over. The Oilers need to win 3 more games. There is only so much you can do as a fan. I thought the crowd was anxious, justifiably so. I do appreciate the vocal plurality that was trying to get Let's Go Oilers chants going with 8, 7, 5 minutes to go in the game. I talked about this 2 weeks ago when the Kings were there. That does matter. The players need the energy, and it does matter. It sounds silly. It sounds very high school sports. It does matter. The players appreciate it. And anything you can do to help usher them along, I do think that matters. I don't think the Oilers can justify starting Calvin Pickard for Game 4. I think if you do that, you entirely shatter Stuart Skinner's confidence, and you really run the risk of, if you send him back out there, he's going to totally self-implode. So I think the Oilers need to invest in whatever that means. If that's a witch doctor and they try and put a spell on him to make him play better, if it's sports psychologist, if it's a if it's a cold tank, if it's a cryo chamber, if it's a hypnotist, whatever they got to do to get Skinner to relax, I think they have to consider it. And that sounds extreme. That sounds bordering on psychopathy, but this game is this close. Skinner makes 1 save. We're having a very different conversation about his performance in this game. And that's what's unfair about this. It's 1 save. It's 1 shot. It's 1 post. And in the playoffs, it really does come down to just a handful of sequences or plays. And without those things going your way, you are in a situation where if it doesn't go right, the changes will be big. Where is the Oilers' quality? That's the biggest thing I wrote down in my notes as I was watching along in both Game 2 and 3. I didn't feel like the Oilers were driving the net well. And some of that is that they're playing Draisaitl and McDavid together. And when you have your 2 best facilitators playing on the same line, that's going to force other guys to do different things. I know they moved Nuge from wing to center on that second line, and he's not a bad playmaker, but he doesn't have the dynamic ability to his game that Leon or Connor do. So that forces him to take on a role maybe he's not as situated for. And then you look through the rest of the lineup. Vander Kane, Ryan McLeod, Dylan Holloway, Janmark, Connor Brown, whoever we're talking about down the list, the vast majority of those guys are just going to cycle and chase. And that has value in putting pressure on the other team's defense and relieving pressure from your own defense. But it's hard to score that way. Look at the Carolina Hurricanes struggles in their playoff series, both against the Rangers and against the Islanders. The cycling, the point shots, the deflections, all that stuff is great, but it's really hard to sustain, and it's really hard to get the goals from that type of offense. We know the most efficient play in hockey is the cross-seam pass from circle to circle that gets the goalie moving left to right. The Oilers can't do that if McDavid and Draisaitl are on the same line and Leon's a little physically compromised. So the last thing I wanted to touch on, I said it in the open, I feel like the officials have lost all semblance of a clue, both in regards to consistency and safety. I think safety is more important. I think in regards to some of the stuff we've seen in these playoffs, the Bennett on Marchand hit in the Florida-Boston series, some of the slashes and cross-checks in this Oilers-Canucks series have been gnarly. I mean, as the game ended at regulation, McDavid gives Carson Soucy a decent slash on the wrist, and Zadorov sees that. He skates over. Soucy puts his stick up, hits McDavid here-ish, I want to say, probably mid-chest towards his neck, and Zadorov hits him probably mid-back, and they have a table-topping effect where they both hit him from both sides, and the game's over. I am under no illusion that either Soucy or Zadorov will get supplemental discipline of any kind, whether it be a fine or a suspension. It won't happen because the officials do not care. I think the sooner fans realize it is not the officials, it is the owners that like the game this way, the sooner we can have more meaningful change. If the owners had issues with the way these games were being played, things would change. George Peros would not be the president, that would not be the head of player safety if the owners were not happy with it. The owners can do whatever they want. You see how quick they were able to facilitate selling the team to the guy in Utah to make the Coyotes the Utah whatevers? A week and a half. If the NHL owners were unhappy with the state of safety or officiating, like that, in a week, they could have Gary and Bill Daly make happen whatever they would like to happen, whether that's more involvement from the replay center, whether that's more officials on the ice, whether that's more oversight or transparency. But it feels like these officials have no clue. It feels like they do not understand what they're supposed to be doing, or it feels like they are taking too much responsibility and trying to manage the game as opposed to calling the game. And I talk about this a lot. Hunter Hodes and I talk about this a lot on the Locked On NHL Power Ranking show every Thursday. The officials are always going to err on the side of managing the game because of appearances. If one team has been called for 2 penalties already, they're going to do their damnedest not to call them for a third and get that other team a power play to get it relatively even and respectable. And that changes the standard for the officiating. And that is why the officiating is so inconsistent. And the threshold for what is and isn't a penalty changes from period to period and game to game. Until the owners feel like it is having a negative impact on the game, they won't do anything. We will continue to get non-answers. We will continue to get players and coaches tweaking the referees and saying, well, I disagree, or we have our opinion, but I won't say anything about it. And that is their subtle way of saying, hey, we don't like this. But you won't see officials get blown up on, even though if arguably they should. I think the officiating this year, and this is probably recency bias, and I am well informed enough to understand that I probably do have a hint of recency bias because I just came from watching the 2 games today, watching the 2 games Saturday. I've been watching at least 2 hockey games a day for the last 3.5, 4 weeks. At a certain point, it feels like the officials are making it up. And that only frustrates the fans on every side. I feel like the officiating in the Oilers and Canucks series has been outright bad. I feel like the threshold for what is and isn't a penalty hasn't been consistent. I feel like guys on both teams have gone down a little bit easier than they probably should have. And the officials have still called the penalty only on the defensive player. I think the Canucks got what they wanted. The Canucks played really well. They won. They won with special teams tonight. Their power play goals set them apart, and they were close enough at 5-on-5. I think we will continue to see tweaking and commenting on the officials because it is a unifying force. Nobody likes referees. But that will just about do it for today's edition of Locked On Oilers. Make sure you are subscribed wherever you get your podcasts if you are over on YouTube. Let me know what your big concern is about the Oilers other than the goaltending, whether that's CC and Nurse, Desharnais and Kulak, the secondary scoring, whatever it is. Let me know in the comments what you're most worried about for the Oilers other than Stuart Skinner. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Until then, let's go Oilers.